Welcome back to The Opinion, guys. In this episode today, we're going to continue with our The Future series. And this time, it's kind of on the same lines as last time, the environment and all of that. Except this time, we're going to more focus in on resources available. Now, specifically, I'm going to focus more on like resources such as precious metals and oil and coal and things of that nature. Now, but I will make a quick mention here at the beginning of resources such as like wood, for example. So everyone talks about the forests shrinking, and this is not necessarily my opinion on deforestation, but everyone talks about deforestation and how it's so bad for the environment. And I mean, I can agree with them on that. But there's actually an interesting theory here. Like, if you think of this as like an economist would, an economist says that recycling can actually be bad because recycling will essentially take away the incentive of like lumber companies to replace trees because there's like since more paper is being reused as paper, lumber companies won't have to replace the trees that they do because if the lumber companies take away every tree, then they don't have a company anymore. So the theory is that lumber companies will replace trees that they cut down, but since you recycle, they don't have to replace as many or even any, and they can still make their profits. Now, that's just an opinion. So like, and I mean those resources are far easier to get. So we don't really need to worry as a mankind. We don't need to worry about that as much as say iron or cobalt, nickel, gold, silver. Name any precious metal or anything. Coal, oil, all of that. Now, I mean, first off, I think it's just think about how much gas in whatever city you live in, how much gas in your city alone gets used. I mean, think about how much oil there actually is on Earth. And the idea of it actually disappearing boggles my mind, but it will happen. It will run out eventually, unless we're willing to wait, millions of years again for it to turn for oil to restock itself. But let's start with the precious metals first because that one has the easier solution, I guess, if you will. So I was actually talking to one of my friends recently, and they actually have a solution. They've like done actual like research into this. Um, they actually have suggested asteroid mining would be the future of precious metals because asteroids can actually they do contain like iron and all of that, all of those types of materials in them. So the idea would to be to go out to asteroids and mine them. The problem becomes, who can own an asteroid? And do you have the right to mine asteroids? And he was explaining it all to me, and it was actually really interesting about how they could actually get like the materials back, and they could actually like the idea is to use water as essentially like a fuel source, which I think that'd be really amazing. I mean, I know we only have limited water too, because the ocean. We'd have to come up with a cheap way to get rid of the salt in the ocean. But I mean, using water as a supply as a fuel source for just for the asteroid mining, that would actually, I mean, better that than take away from the oil supply and any other resource. But the harder one to fix is the oil industry because the oil industry is like the one thing that like everyone relies on. Any like first world country relies on oil so much that you can essentially hold a country hostage with oil. I mean, it's been done before, and it makes people really mad when they don't get their gas. So replacing oil that eventually will run out, honestly, it needs to be done sooner rather than later. That's why I'm kind of like a big fan of Tesla because, hey, more people that drive electric cars, longer the oil will last. And you know what? Tesla makes really cool looking cars. I don't care what other people think. I mean, sure they're electric, but who cares? It's a nice looking car. Assuming you get a nice looking one. They have more modest ones, but it's just the biggest hoop for that one isn't necessarily coming up with the alternative. What it is it's getting past the oil companies, because the oil companies are arguably the most powerful companies in the world, because you can hear stories about people coming up with like solutions that would like reduce oil consumption in cars. Well, gas consumption, I mean. It would reduce gas consumption in cars, or like someone comes up with an alternative to gas as a fuel source. And you always hear how these companies essentially kind of swoop in real quick before they can finish their work or make it public. They swoop in and they'll like buy the idea, or they'll buy the design, or they'll pay the person to keep quiet or whatever. And they'll do this and get rid of that idea. I remember I was in school, and I forget what year my teacher was telling me about this, but someone developed a thing that would make cars run on like a fraction of the fuel. And an oil company came in and bought that design and then never implemented it, because to them that lowers their profits, because their demand their demand for oil won't be as high because you'll use less. You won't need as much. You won't need it. So I guess what really bugs me is that corporations, you're going to find out I really hate corporations to a degree, and I also love them. More hate though, because corporations have a lot of power that they wield all the time, and no one checks them. The government doesn't check them. They kind of have free reign, which I think is stupid. But the future for resources is there. Mankind will eventually wake up and realize that the resources we have aren't going to last forever. It's just a matter of when, because I don't foresee it happening anytime soon, especially like the asteroid mining thing. That would be difficult to do. It's not impossible, but the real problem is, interspace travel from that distance would be difficult. But nonetheless, definitely possible. I mean, we're trying to put a man on Mars right now, and I mean, that's seems impossible. Seems like something out of a sci-fi movie, but here we are on the cusp of doing it. But really, the most interesting thing for me will be the alternative to oil, because I don't know what the alternative for oil or coal would be, because the difference is you can't. I wouldn't. I would. I'm assuming there's no oil or coal in these asteroids, because in order to have oil or coal, it's essentially decompose after millions of years in pressure. It's organic matter, and I wouldn't think there wouldn't be organic matter on asteroids. So, I mean, electricity seems like the most, like electric cars. I mean, that's like the most viable option as of now that I can see. But will that actually replace oil in the future? It might have to, until we can come up with something else. Or, I mean, humans can just start walking everywhere, riding bikes, taking horses. That won't happen. No, that would never happen. But I guess like this overall, since the first two were kind of climate related, I was in class one day, and my professor in economics, he asked the class, he's like, "What's the optimal amount of pollution?" And someone raised their hand and was like, confident. I mean, I thought this was the answer too. Said zero. And he said, wrong. Because the problem is, this is just like immediately, like off the top of your head, is every single person in the world going to agree to give up driving? No. There will be at least one person in the billions of people on this planet that will say, I'm driving my car. So automatically, the optimal amount is not zero. That's not counting factories that guzzle out CO2 into the atmosphere. So right off the bat, zero is not even, it's impossible is what he was getting at. It's impossible to be at zero. Sure, that is like the best amount that you could have, but it's impossible. So that's not the optimal amount. The optimal amount it doesn't really have a number, but it's, as low as you can get it. I just thought that was interesting. That was like right off the bat, first thing, like in first day of class, he said that, and I was like, this is gonna be a fun course. And it actually has been a really fun course. It's definitely been eye-opening. But the future of resources, while it seems dark and unknown, I actually feel like there's actually like a bright outlook, because the need for an alternative will actually create a new resource of some sort, or some new technology that will help enhance like electricity or something. It'll essentially bring in a new wave of innovation, and it'll bring in some new tech minds, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens. There will be some discovery, something. So it'll be something big will happen to help replace any resources, whether that be the asteroid mining or whether that be making electricity available to power all cars. I mean, it's unknown. The real future is unknown. My opinion, I think everything will be okay in this aspect, because humans are not just going to settle for giving up on iron that they can then turn into steel. They're not going to give up on trying to find gold or trying to find silver or cobalt or nickel or just et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And same with oil and coal. I mean, they'll probably try to find it elsewhere, but I don't know where you'll find that. So eventually they'll have to do something different. So it'll be okay. It'll be interesting to see just in our lifetimes alone how our use of resources changes. I almost wonder if the government at one point will finally realize resources are becoming scarce and put some sort of like limit on how much you can use, like limit the amount of gasoline. I'm not saying that's a good idea or that I want it. I'm just saying it'll be interesting to see if they do that before they come up with an alternative, or they really start to employ professionals to develop an alternative. But that'll be it for today, guys. Hope you guys had a good day as I'm posting this at night, and I hope you guys have a great week. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and have a good day.